Hello and welcome back, everyone, to the February edition of our monthly webinar series. So hope you're all doing well. I'm Ertuğ Kara. I'm joined by a familiar face, Patrick Stoppman from our amazing labs team. Hi, Patrick. And we got a new face on the webinar, our technical product manager, Thorsten Schreiber, who will be jumping in to walk us through a new feature of the platform. So we hope he will be a regular on these sessions, really. So you will be seeing more of him throughout the year. Hi, Thorsten. If you're new here, this is where we go through some of the latest detection updates, and we will break down some interesting techniques we observe around the malware and share what's going on in the threat landscape, all while keeping it both kind of conversational and technical. So now we got something extra for you this time, as Thorsten is with us. Alongside detection updates, we are also covering some new features from our latest release, which is 2025.1.0. We will keep it, light and technical, but it's a solid update, and we want you to know what's new. As always, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We will try to get to as many as we can at the end. And as always, this session will be recorded, so to share later on. Let's get things started with the agenda. So it's a usual detection webinar agenda if you're familiar. It's a mix of new VTIs, new detections, and fresh Yara rules, and some other cool updates. As always, we will share some knowledge around, changing threat landscape around malware and phishing threats. And also, as always, we've got demos by both my colleagues, Patrick and Thorsten, to bring it all together. So let's start with VTIs. And the first VTI of the day, as you know, it's the acronym for VMRay Threat Identifier. So this one is about displaying adapter display adapter enumeration. So if you have looked into the sandbox, evasion tricks, you probably seen this one, like malware checking for virtual environments. And one way they do that is by calling a specific function in display devices. And Azure, for example, was called using this technique, and it loops through display adapters and looks for known virtual machine related names. It can be like Hyper-V or VMware or VBox. And if it finds one, it just shuts down to avoid running, in a sandbox and to get analyzed. And of course, this API isn't inherently bad. Normal developers use it to check display configurations, but malware others take advantage of this in different ways. It can be used for system fingerprinting, like checking monitor count, GPU names, or again, whether a system has virtual displays. And of course, this can help for evasion, to skip execution if it detects a virtual machine. So right now we have this VTI, flagging this behavior whenever it happens and whenever any suspicious attempts around this. And next up, we have got a new VTI for detecting BYOVD attacks. So this is the acronym for Bring Your Own Vulnerable Driver. If you follow ransomware techniques, you've probably seen this a lot in the past year. In fact, actually, Cisco Talos group team put together some solid research on how different groups have used this method. And you can see here a quick timeline starting from January 2024 and of kind of notable cases. And for anyone unfamiliar, this kind of attack is when attackers take a legitimate driver with known vulnerabilities and use it to gain, like deep access, deep control over a system. And since drivers run inside the kernel, that's dangerous. So the real trick here is that these drivers are signed by trusted vendors. And that means they are already verified as safe. But if they have a flaw, attackers can, for example, load the vulnerable driver onto the target system and exploit the flaw to gain kernel level access. And as we said, it can be dangerous. So they can disable security tools and making the malware execution undetectable. So previously, actually, we rolled out a Yara rule around this to catch some of the more common, BYOVD related files. But now we have added an extra layer so that there's a VTI so that we are flagging this earlier, let's say. And before we jump to the next VTI, of course, maybe it's worth mentioning that Microsoft has been doing something to tackle these attacks. So they kind of introduced a block list of known vulnerable drivers, which was originally part of Windows Defender application control and later moved into Windows Security in newer versions. So at this point, actually, I would like to turn to Patrick. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, on possible improvement with these block lists. And yeah, Patrick, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, so I really think that having this sort of block list is already a very good start, right? So, I mean, we all know that this bring your own vulnerable driver attacks are getting more and more often, or they're getting more and more frequent. So we see just more out of them. And it's also very easy for developers that if you just develop a new driver to add any of these security flaws, vulnerabilities, right? I mean, we're just human, that can happen, of course. The only important thing is that there is a frequent update also to drivers if possible. So as for this case, I totally think the block list is very valuable. That already helps a lot maybe in mitigating some of those techniques and attacks. But I still think that you have to consider the whole event or chain of execution to really understand whether this is malicious or not, right? So there is a lot of applications out there that unfortunately make use of those vulnerable drivers, even though the applications are completely legitimate and just being used regular, right? So just saying we are going to block this is good because it potentially adds some security risks to your environment, but it can of course also block some execution, some legitimate or valid execution at the same time. So considering this whole chain, like we are doing this right now, we have the Yara rule that's very, very low score. It just has 1 out of 5 to indicate that there is a driver being used in this analysis that at least is known to be vulnerable. And then we have the VTI that's has a slightly higher score of 2 out of 5, which indicates that this known vulnerable driver we have detected via Yara rules is actually being loaded as well during the analysis. So those actions are suspicious, and we decided to go with a 2 out of 5 from the VTI score point of view, because it still can be used in legitimate applications, even though it shouldn't be used, but it still can happen. And considering the whole chain of execution or the whole chain of events, then of course VMRay platform can provide a proper score if there is something else going on besides just loading this driver to really end up with a malicious verdict if required. So we just say there is maybe some suspicious things going on because application loads this driver, but if there's nothing else, that it still could be fine, even though you shouldn't do that. But if there's anything beyond that, then of course we are going to also increase our score to flag the analysis as malicious to provide a proper protection for that.
Amazing. Thanks, Patrick. I was also going to ask about the reason for the VTI score, but you already answered that one as well. Thank
Sorry
you
for taking that.
No worries. So moving on. Yeah, this next one isn't a new one, a new threat identifier, but it's now like working smarter, let's say, with another feature of VMRay, which is smart link detonation. So time to time, we touch on the SLD, and we also have some updates around smart link detonation. So we already have a VTI that detects when an email spoofs a trusted sender. Many campaigns, we know that relying on this trick to increase the success rate. So of course, catching it early is important. Now with this update, if a spoof sender is detected while you're analyzing an email via IR mailbox or a manual submission of a suspicious email, whatever, so the SLD can kick in automatically. So every URL in the email from that point, whether it is in the body or hidden in attachment, can get detonated and analyzed. And the system, can follow the links, examines the pages they lead to, and flags anything suspicious. So standard analysis, deep analysis of the phishing threats. So this is, again, a great example of different parts of the platform working together. So one module like VTI, for example, we flag this spoof sender, and another, based on that, can dig into the links, which can be found in that body of the email. So it can feel like a natural upgrade, let's say. So this was it around the VTIs. And again, I would like to highlight that these are kind of the ones that actually we thought it can be highlighted. So if you would like to see all the VTI updates, all the detection updates, probably this is the best to check out our blog and read out what's new. So moving on to the error rules quickly, we have a continuous effort, our labs team putting a continuous great effort to refine our sandbox detections, as well as malware family identification. So this is actually, as part of that, we are putting there the new error rules. And if you've been following our updates, you know that every month we track and add rules for new fish kits as well. And last month, it was SRJ and Blur, so that there were two different phishing kits. And this time we have got a new one, Phishkit.RandLoad. And this one actually stands out for a few reasons. First one is, instead of using static phishing URL, it generates the URL dynamically. So which makes the link actual phishing link. I mean, making unique, and it can make the detection harder. And it uses iframes to display a fake Microsoft login page inside the phishing site. This is something classic trick to make it look legitimate. And of course, it leans the lure around, to force urgency for the victim, right? Which usually reference invoices or kind of subscription renewals. So right now, we have to tackle this. We have added a new error rule, that helps us flag these type of files. And the next one, it's an interesting one. This new error rule, targets Metasploit shellcodes like meter preter, like reverse shells. If you have a pen testing background, I'm sure you're familiar with this. So Metasploit remains one of the most widely used offensive security frameworks. I mean, not just for pen testers, but also, of course, increasingly leveraged by cyber criminals for especially post-exploitation. And while there are tools like out there, CobbleStrike and Sliver, like C2 frameworks, they are often associated with red teaming and kind of persistence. Metasploit is still commonly deployed in rapid exploitation scenarios, especially in commodity malware campaigns. So these signatures are now active in our sandbox for real-time detection. So before we move on, here is actually this month's community note, which is kind of very relevant here. So this section, community note, actually we started last month to highlight useful external research from the community. And this time, very relevant, we are looking at a fresh blog post from the DFIR team. They just published it just yesterday. So it's a good breakdown of a Lockbit ransomware attack that happened earlier this month. And it's a good example, showing how Metasploit was used in post-exploitation. And a few key takeaways from the research, so then you can go check out. But the attack started with the exploitation of a Confluence application on a Windows server, and they used Metasploit just 10 minutes after gaining initial access. And in under 2 hours, Lockbit was deployed. So that's kind of a very interesting read. And you can see how the attackers initial metasploit access led directly to setting up, for example, other tools like AnyDesk for persistence, and that pivot from an automated framework to more hands-on control via AnyDesk. So it seems like it's kind of getting common, getting regular in these type of ransomware cases. So if you want to deep dive, deeper, how Metasploit plays a role, good stuff, real world ransomware operations. So at this point, again, Patrick, do you think, what are your thoughts on this? So our update, New Year rule also, do you think we will see more of this type, more, Metasploit usage? I think the answer is yes, but still.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let me first start with, I thought this while you're talking about it, I really believe that this report has a very, very great timing, right? I also looked it up yesterday evening. So it's very interesting that this now fits to our webinar as well. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Metasploit is out there for years, and we have had Yara rules for it already, but they were a bit outdated, and so we decided to also catch up on that front and just added new rules for it as well to detect different stages. But I really believe that Metasploit is heavily being used, and this trend will definitely continue because, I mean, just look how easy it is to access Metasploit. It's an open source framework, at least the free version. You can install it on every machine. You can generate your payloads. You can even, of course, buy it if you want to get more out of it. But I really think that Metasploit has been used in the past a lot, and it will definitely not go away when it comes to post-exploitation. So I really believe this YARVL adds additional effort in detecting and also providing some classifications on what tools and techniques has been used during attack chains.
Amazing. Thanks, Patrick, for the insights again. So moving on. So one last error rule, before we wrap up this section around the error rules. This one is for BruteRatel C4. Again, if red teaming tools in your radar, BruteRatel is right up there with CobbleStrike in terms of growing popularity. And something to highlight around how it is used. Towards the end of last year, as researchers actually observed Latrodactys delivering BruteRatel payloads, and with some analysts actually linking these campaigns to Lunar Spider, a well-known financially motivated group that previously pushed IcedID, another loader. So probably because after FBI's Operation Endgame, they kind of shifted tactics, now leveraging Latrodactys and BruteRatel C4 together. And what makes BruteRatel again interesting is its especially anti-detection capabilities. So it was specifically designed to bypass EDR and AV tools, within the red teaming scenarios. And they have built-in techniques like indirect syscalls and a debugger to detect EDR hooks. So to help with tracking and detection, we have added a new error rule around BruteRatel payloads. And before we move on, here is another community note. This time, a great resource from Jeremy Fernandez on hunting C2 frameworks using internet scanning tools like Census, for example. And in the blog post, he shares queries you can use to spot some of the more common C2 frameworks, not only BruteRatel, but also CobbleStrike and Sliver and others. Again, if you're someone who likes to dig into the infrastructure hunting in your spare time, this could be some solid food for thought, I believe, and definitely worth checking out if you want to explore new ways to track adversary infrastructure. That's fun stuff. So moving forward, we just talked about BruteRatel. Researching, tracking these threats is key. And the more samples you analyze, for example, in the sandbox, the more you need clear visibility into what you're dealing with, right? So with these webinars, we try to give you a good mix, like insights into the threat landscape, and also a look behind the scenes at how we stay on top of these threats. But it's not just about detections. The platform itself, so VMRay platform, keeps evolving to help also streamline your research process and sandboxing experience, let's say. And on that note, I will pass it over right now to my colleague Torsten for a quick walkthrough of a new search feature in the UI of VMRay. So Torsten, it's all yours.
Thanks, R2. So let me take this opportunity to introduce a brand new feature from our latest release, and that's related to malware families. So if you, as an analyst, need a faster, more precise way to find samples by signature within the VMRay platform, yeah, the next topic will help you. So in the next few minutes, you will discover how our new feature, Advanced Search for Threat Names, helps you to quickly identify relevant samples within the VMRay platform so you can gain deeper insight. So let's dive into it. So maybe you already know that our platform displays detected signatures and malware families on the sample overview and dynamic analysis report pages in our console. And these detections, they come from multiple sources within the VMRay platform. First, our behavioral and static detection rules, then the reputation system, the built-in AV, and last but not least, also our malware configuration extraction feature. And many of you have asked for a way to search for these signatures to quickly find multiple samples belonging to the same malware family. Well, and with the product team, we listened, and now with our new feature that is available for the console, but also for API, you can do exactly that. And let me show you how it works in our console. We are now looking at the dynamic analysis report, and you can see the thread names here in the left-hand side of the header. If I click on the +7, you see that there are a lot of labels that are generated, and I want to show like how they are generated and what sources they come from. So let's start with our Yara rules. We can see that our VTI thread identifiers give clarity where those detection comes from. And here we see that for Yara rules, in this case, a hit, and on memory dumps that give this BruteRatel label. But we have more families here listed, right? So we also look at our built-in AV labels. And as you can see, there are a lot of generics in there, but we think it's good to have a system to then clarify so that you don't miss anything. As I also said, there are that coming from the reputation. This one is on the file, but also on the URLs that were, or the domains that were called and we could see during the analysis. But what if you want to know whether you have more instances of this malware analyzed in the past? Yeah, you now can go to the submission list and search for it. So here you can see all everything that is in your repository. I can see here now 91 total items. And when I click on the advanced search and I choose as a category the thread name, I have multiple operators so that I also can use wildcards, correct search, and I take the BruteRatel because that was the malware we looked just a few seconds ago. Yeah, I can just search for it and I can find all the instances of this malware, right? And yeah, one thing that's also, maybe I can just highlight this out, the technique that R2, you mentioned it a couple of seconds ago, that the BruteRatel is having anti-analysis capabilities by making indirect system calls, right? So they can, hide in front of EDRs and other detection tools. And here you can see them listed all detected by our system. But yeah, you can also maybe you can look if you're more file-based, you can also use the sample list to look for the analysis, but also you can directly go for the analysis, because sometimes maybe you want to know well, if a certain malware hit on a certain operating system. Yeah, I just wanted to show the use case when you look for a threat name on analysis level, and that this also can provide value. Let's have like a look for another threat name, the async ART, which is a remote access toolkit. And maybe you're interested in like just Windows 11 analysis, so you can see them in the target environment. You can then like go directly to the analysis. And that's also another example where our family labels come from, right? So you can see we have a extracted configuration where you as an analyst also can then see what is the exact address, so that you can skip like redundant work and you can focus on that what matters. And yeah, to wrap it up, I hope this feature proves valuable in all your daily work, making it easier to gain deeper insights within our platform. So thanks, Ertu, for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. That's it from my side.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Torsten. So I had some technical issues, but I'm back. So we will move on after Torsten's walkthrough of threats, the new feature, searching threat names in the UI. I think that would be definitely of value for current VMRay users who are analyzing the malware and would like to search specific malware among all the other sandbox reports available in the platform. So right now, of course, I took the mic back for a moment to cover another update from our latest release. This one will be about residential VPN support in the sandbox. Up until now, our platform has had a VPN functionality, so it can let you route traffic through specific countries. Like, for example, you can pick Spain and to bypass geo-based evasion tricks of the malware. Now we added residential egress traffic option. So a few key things here. So there are private rotating IPs. So this means less chance of the traffic being flagged by C2 servers in the let's say threat actors, and more realistic analysis. So the malware may be behaving more naturally when it thinks it's running outside a public cloud network. And this is now available across all our cloud products, including our legacy analyzer. And now, of course, I have to bring in Patrick. Patrick, what would be your take on this, especially how it can be of value when it comes to phishing analysis?
Yeah, so seems to be quite busy today, but so for phishing, I would say the main reason where this is very important and where this comes to play is actually when it comes to phishing analysis. We have seen that quite often in the past, that whenever you visit a phishing page with an IP address that is coming from a cloud-based network, which is usually well known, and you can even query those networks up publicly, then a lot of phishing pages just say, well, it's very unlikely that any user that we are going to target, any enterprise organization, any private user at home, is using a cloud-based IP address as its source, basically. So this is very unlikely. And we often have observed the behavior that phishing pages then completely act differently. So some of them are just don't load at all. Some of them do load, but they show any Wikipedia pages or any pages with cars and so on. We even have released recently a YARA rule for one of them. And in the majority of the cases, the reason why phishing pages behave differently is because they detected the environment based on the IP address that was used to visit that page. So to mitigate that issue and to ensure we can provide better detection on phishing pages, whereas we actually reach the phishing page, we have introduced this new feature of the residential VPNs. So based on this, for phishing pages, it's getting way more difficult to even determine whether this is coming from a legitimate user or if this is coming from a automated analysis environment like our web analysis.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. And I will come back to you in a minute. So next up is a new detection for something you might have seen popping up a lot lately. Pastejacking, also known as clickbooks, highly possible you came across in some research, if not in your environment. So it's not new, but it's been getting more attention recently. And it's basically a social engineering trick appearing with different shapes. And now we can catch when a web page, for example, messes with the browser clipboard. So while tricking the victim into copying and running malicious content, this can work whether you're interacting manually via VMRay's live interaction or using our adaptive browsing simulation to automate the clicks. So I could keep talking about it, but we have got Patrick here who has put together a demo. So rather than me badly describing it, I will pass the mic to him. It's Patrick, all yours.
Oh, well, so I was sure you're going to do a great job anyways, but let me quickly share my screen. And I guess we extend the half an hour a little bit today, but it's anyways recorded if you have to leave. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to present two new things at the same time, whereas the very first thing is even supporting for this pastejacking samples with a new feature that we have recently introduced with VMRay platform 2025.1, which is designed to detect clipboard access during web analysis. And at the same time, as Ertu already displayed in the slides, we are going to have a new VTI that's capable of detecting this behavior as well. So let me quickly take one look here into an analysis report for a sample that we picked up a couple of days ago, which is just an HTML file, which is using pastejacking as a social engineering technique to try infect some hosts. So this time we are using the VMRay web analysis report that we're going to look into. And of course, we immediately can see it's a malicious sample. We know that already anyways. But let me focus on our VMRay threat identifiers here for a couple of seconds. So very first one is we do have also a YARA rule to detect these pages. Could be either just a HTML file, it could be a URL, a website, whatever. Just to really know that this is pastejacking, we have introduced this YARA rule as a fallback mechanism as well. We have some reputation hits there, which Thorsten previously explained pretty well. And then, of course, we have our new VTI that also says that this could be a potential pastejacking attempt. And in this case, it's very special because the technique description says that a Windows batch command is copied to clipboard by a specific web page, by a specific URL. So you may wonder, why do we even need to detect clipboard access? Or what is happening in the background here? How is this social engineering technique even working? Well, we can quickly take a look here when opening the screenshots that are coming from the VMRay platform. So we see here the web page is being loaded. It doesn't look like a fully working web page. There are some images and icons missing. Could always be a suspicious indicator that something is a bit off the road, or maybe just something is broken, of course, but we always have to be careful. But once those pages has been loaded, we do see a capture verification dialog or page that just says, are you a robot or human? And they want us to check the box to confirm that we are a human. So nothing pretty strange here, except there's one thing. Not even sure if anyone has seen that or is anyone coming across it on legitimate pages, but I believe that there is not really any legitimate page out there where you only see the capture and this little dialogue on a single page. Usually this is part of a logon form where you have to click that, or maybe a form that you're going to submit, but it's very unlikely that this is the only element that is being displayed here. Well, so the only action item that we can see here or that a user can do here is just click this checkbox, right? And this is going to happen here as well. It doesn't really matter if our adaptive browser simulation automatically clicks on those events, on those actions. So for all you don't know that, the adaptive browser simulation is our, let's call it simulation or human behavior simulation during the web analysis. So it tries to mimic human behavior via clicking on relevant elements or buttons that are being shown on the web page. In this case, Auto UI completely clicked on that. But of course, you could also do that manually with the live interaction feature. And then you see out of nowhere this interesting verification steps that are being popped up here that just say, well, there are 3 steps. The very first one is you have to press the Windows button plus R, which opens this Windows run dialog where you can just take commands and programs to put in there and execute them. Then you have to press Control V, which we all know is for pasting something, and then you have to press Enter. So we open this run dialog, then we paste something, and then we press enter. The only question is left, where is the data coming from that we are going to put in there, right? So something has to be put into the clipboard before we're going to paste that. And this is done by the web page in the background. So as soon as you or our adaptive browser simulation is clicking this checkbox, sometimes it could be a button as we've seen before with this click fix stuff, the clipboard content of the VM of Windows is pre-filled with usually a PowerShell command, a batch command, or something else that can be executed on Windows. And then if you just paste that stuff, there's sometimes even an interesting technique where they put some comments before that says, well, verification code, maybe even adding a number so that it looks like legitimate because the window is quite small. And then all the way at the end that users usually can see, there's the actual PowerShell command. And when you press enter, this is being executed. So with this new feature, we are able to detect when web pages or HTML files are putting data into the clipboard of Windows. This is then, of course, triggering our VTIs that we've mentioned before, that there could be a potential paste-checking attempt. So you may wonder, what is happening afterwards? Well, this is basically the web analysis where we only analyze stuff in Chrome. We want to focus on the web behavior itself. But if you even click these action items here, you can go to the copied data, or you can also, of course, use the Files tab to just look into here. And here we've introduced a new category for files, which is the clipboard content. And even the remark says that this file artifact represents the content of clipboard access during the analysis. So it's pretty described, I think, in a clear way that whatever is in there, it's just 248 bytes. It's a batch script in this case, has been extracted from the clipboard. Well, and that's in theory everything for the web analysis itself. So you may wonder, how we can, is there a way to still analyze that stuff? And of course there is, because this is happening automatically in the background. So let me go back to the sample overview here of this HTML file. So switching from the analysis back to the sample, we can see here some child sample relations. So there's a relation type, which is the clipboard content, and it has been recursively submitted as a Windows batch file. So everything works out of the box in an automated way in the background. And if we jump over to this sample that has been recursively submitted, you can see exactly the same thing here. That's the clipboard content. It has been recursively submitted. And yeah, we can also take a very quick look into the analysis itself. As in this case, we can see it's immediately flagged as malicious as well. We have plenty of different VTIs triggering here. For this instance, the PowerShell command that is being used, or the batch command in this paste-checking attempt, is dropping hijack loader, which then continues its execution and also drops a stealer for exfiltrating data from the system. Just from a very brief look on the VTI side here, you can see everything from input capture on discovery, data collection, or even some of my favorites is defense evasion part that it attempts to see if there's any antivirus product installed, any anti-spyware product, any firewalls on that machine. Then, of course, we have plenty of discovery behavior where it tries to search for mail data, for browsers, for any other interesting credentials that it can find on the system. And that, of course, everything happens completely automated. And well, if you look to the process graph here, we can see we use, of course, the command line on Windows to start this extracted clipboard data. Then it spawned PowerShell, another executable that's, yeah, well, seems to be not coming from the system. So it's probably downloaded somewhere and then continues the execution. And before we are going to wrap that up, let me quickly show you one nice trick here as well. So if you go to the behavior tab, we can see here this whole process overview. And we know we just submitted this clipboard content as a file artifact, right? It's this, how do you call it? It's extracted file.bat. So this just starts whatever is in there, which in this case is a PowerShell command, which is exactly this one. And this is also the data that has been put into the clipboard during the web analysis. And once this has been executed, we can see there is some other stuff going to be executed, which is not by default on the machine. So what you can also do is you can just copy this data here. I'm just curious where this is coming from. PowerShell said it's encoded, which usually means it's just base64 encoded. So we can just base64 decode that whole command. Oops, we don't want to encode it. We just want to decode that command. And then we see it's kind of readable, but not fully. So we can also just decode the text. Should be UTF-16 little Indian. And there I can actually see what's happening in the background. Let me zoom in a bit here. It's just creating a new web client object, and then it's just using this hard-coded URL to download whatever is behind that, and then uses invoke expression command from PowerShell, which also indicates that whatever is going to be downloaded is just another PowerShell script. And then the execution continues, which drops an archive with some additional files and the sealer that we've mentioned before. And all of this data and information, of course, is available in the analysis report. And everything just started with this HTML file or with the URL. And the whole analysis there is completely automated. So when you just submit the URL, there's any paste checking attempt in any of those recursive submissions that we provide, you should be able to get this whole information that we've just walked through right now. That's basically it from my side. With that being said, Atu, I just give it back to you.
Amazing, Patrick. And honestly, I was relieved when you could just close the CyberChef dashboard, that you didn't go further when we are live. So great demo, Patrick, as always. Thank you. So yeah, I didn't have too many slides left after a fantastic demo. Before we jump into Q&A, we always like to wrap things up by sharing some great resources. And you will get this presentation after the session as well. But there are some great research and some blog posts, as well as our own blog posts around the recent release and recent detection updates you can go ahead and check out. And also more the sandbox reports mentioned throughout the webinar. Here you can check them as well, the new VTIs and ERA rules and all new detections. So with that, I would like to open it up for Q&A. And one thing, as you probably type your questions, I noted not to forget is really feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and provide feedback on these sessions. If they're worth your time, help us see how it can be improved, you know, this type of stuff. We are open to all your feedback. Now, we can look at the questions. I think this one is for Thorsten. So can we search for threat names in both automated and manual submission setups? So Thorsten, would you want to take this one?
Yes. So it's yes, we can search in manual and automated submitted ones. We can use either the UI or the API. So yeah, that should be definitely possible.
Amazing. So the via API, it's possible as well.
Yes, yes.
That's one key information.
Yeah, because whenever we design a feature, we always try to think of both ends, right? So we know it's in the console, but when we can automate it, right, then we also release it for the API, because that's also kind of a part of our mindset, right? That we want to be able that our analysts or that our customers can automate things, because also we believe that this is one of our strengths.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you, Thorsten. And another question, I believe this is for Patrick. So which type of evasion techniques do you see gaining popularity these days, like for disabling, bypassing EDRs? just today, I actually came across the leaks around Black Basta, this ransomware group, and there were some discussions that wasn't kind of surprising, but at the same time interesting. That there were discussions around how they're gonna evade EDRs, how they're gonna kill EDRs. So it was kind of always a question, right? So Patrick, what would you say about those, evasion techniques gaining popularity?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's quite obvious anyways that we will see more trends and more techniques that are coming up that are going to either bypass EDRs, make them blind, or completely shut them down. I have also recently come across some interesting samples. I think there was some post on Twitter as well. Whereas sometimes threat actors are not even trying to shut those EDRs down. Sometimes it's also already enough to try to block them from communicating with their servers, right? So EDRs are also usually try to correlate as much events as they can together, and they usually need the server component for that as well. And if you just block the client from being able to communicate with the server, it already can give you some ways on how to get around them. And the most easiest way that we've seen is that they are just trying to figure out which addresses is being used for the server, host names usually, and then just adding them to the hosts file and redirecting to them to local host. Could be one example, right? But at the same time, the other example that we briefly discovered before is, of course, making use of vulnerable drivers. So whenever you have a vulnerable driver, then of course you can completely shut it down. You have kernel level access, you can have kernel level execution, and you can just completely kill the EDR in most cases. Might be some exceptions where it doesn't work, but in general, I believe those two trends are being very are being on the rise, and we will see more of them in the future.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that one is called EDR Silencer, as far as I remember.
There are a couple of projects there. It's EDR Silencer, it's EDR Killer. There are a couple of nice GitHub projects out there as well that are trying to, exactly achieve that goals.
All right. So that's a wrap for this session. So huge thanks for everybody joining, and thank you, Torsten, Patrick, for your insights. And just one more thing, mark your calendars for the next edition of this webinar, which will be on March 25th. And yeah, see you next month. Thank you, everyone.